On this episode, we learn about street addresses in Seoul, South Korea. Then we talk with a Japanese professor about pedestrians and bicyclists in Japan. Finally, we look at pedestrians and bicyclists in Seoul. Stay tuned.
We're in Seoul, Korea, talking with David Kilburn. Traditionally, how are addresses for houses determined in Seoul?
Until a few years ago, that would have been a very good question. You would really be amazed how addresses came into existence. But the system was really quite a simple one. A district would have a block number based on when it was entered into the land registry, and then buildings within that block would have an individual number based on the order in which they were built. Very logical. But when you come to the area as a new visitor, you have no idea how to get from number 1 building to number 2 building, because they don't necessarily have to be side by side. Many people complained that this was unwieldy and difficult, hard to understand, even harder to follow. And they had a point there. To add to the complication, there could be some differences in the way this was done in different parts of Korea. So if you figured you understood exactly how it worked in Seoul, this didn't necessarily stand you in the same good stead in other locations. So eventually the government decided to rationalize the address system. They introduced road names for the first time, and then you would have subsidiary road names. So if the main road is Bukchon Road, then you would have subsidiary road names like Bukchon Road, number 1 Gil, number 2 Gil, and so on. Then with each road you would have a sequence of building numbers that followed the logical order of where the building stood. So if you're standing at building number 1, you knew the building number 2 was going to be next door. You knew that building number 10 would be a little further down the street. Both forms of address continue to coexist. The old form, although it was inconvenient, people knew it. The names of the districts often had historic associations going back a very, very long time. The new road names have no such associations, and so there's certain kind of longing for what might have been lost in the associations of the old names. For instance, we were at Anguk subway earlier. The Anguk district is named after a famous 14th century scholar. See, Kaedong, the district we're standing now, is named because of the Feng Shui character the area was deemed to have in the 14th century. So, in the central part of Seoul, where most of these historical associations exist, there's a feeling that something was lost in going to the new address system. But elsewhere, that's not necessarily true. See, most of South Seoul was farming land until the early 1980s. Most of northern Seoul, beyond the mountains, was uninhabited, again until the 1980s. So there aren't the same links to history as there were in central Old Seoul.
Japan, Tokyo, they still use a similar system where you find your way into the district and the sub-district, and then you're at the mercy of what building was built first and how it was subdivided. Judging from the experience you had here in Seoul, what advice would you give Tokyo for what they may or may not want to do?
Well, I wouldn't give the Japanese any advice because they devised workarounds to the problems. For instance, outside many stations in Tokyo, you'll find a large street map that shows every building in the neighborhood and different routes to here, there, or wherever. And again, alongside many stations, you'll have a police box or a koban. And here, the police will have elaborate district maps, and they are as used to giving directions to Japanese as they are to visiting tourists. See, in Japan, it's a problem not just for the visitors; it's a serious problem for the Japanese as well. But they've worked around it. So with a combination of help from your neighborhood police officer, the station map at the district, and the internet now, it's more difficult to get lost in Tokyo than it used to be.
We're talking with Professor Hiro Koike. What's the transportation system like for people getting around a Japanese city?
In Japan, most of them are by car, automobile, especially in the rural area. Of course, in the big city like Tokyo, you have a fancy subway systems and all kinds of rail systems. And of course, recently the number of bicycle users or cyclists are increasing. That is the main mode. And surely the walking is a basic, most important mode of transport.
It's in a big city like Tokyo. What are transportation policies like? What is the government trying to promote? How is the government promoting it?
Not only Tokyo, but generally speaking, in Japan, the current national policy is automobile-based, automobile-oriented. So all the road and the highways are made mainly for automobile. But things are changing gradually. As I said, in the big cities, the main mode of transport is subways and the trains, so it's a public transport. But gradually, the national government policy just started to change toward more people-oriented or pedestrian-oriented. And one of the new move is to take the bicycle more seriously. Yeah.
And someone visiting Tokyo for the first time who didn't know any better might be surprised at the number of bicycles you see. How is the government dealing with bicycles in terms of infrastructure and policy? And
yeah. Until quite recently, I would say about 5 years ago, we had the earthquake, the Great East Japan earthquake. At that time, all the roads are damaged and trains are stopped because of the shortage of the power. And people found or rediscovered the nice mode of transport, bicycle. And the number of cyclists are increasing very rapidly, and it became a very popular mode. It used to be a very popular mode, but now more and more people are riding on a bicycle. And because of that, the number of bicycle accidents, especially bicycle hit pedestrians, are increasing. As I might have mentioned, in Japan, bicycles are allowed on the sidewalks. So there is quite a few increase of the accidents, bicycle hit pedestrians. So now the government policy is to shift bicycle from sidewalks to roadway. And Japanese traffic law determined the bicycle, in principle, should run on the left side of the roadway, not on the sidewalks. But about 40, 50 years ago, actually in 1970s, there are so many bicycle accidents hit by the automobile. So the then government allowed bicycle to run on the sidewalks almost as a temporary measure. But that temporary measure lasted until now. So now they are starting to shift back, especially these 5 years or so. It's a very slow process. People are so accustomed to ride on the bicycle on sidewalks. So it will take a long, long time to switch back to roadway. And my research area is how to shift bicycle from sidewalks to roadway. And we are measuring that, the effect of that new policy.
And changes need to be made in infrastructure, in education. What have you found that works?
Yeah, all of them. Both infrastructure. We provide the bike lanes wherever we can make it possible. Other than that, we put the blue arrow-shaped marking on the left side of the road and encourage the people to switch to use that, say, bicycle, either bicycle lane or this blue arrow bicycle path. And people started to very gradually, slowly, people started to switch. And we, in our city, Utsunomiya, we are the first place in Japan, one of the first places in Japan to implement this new policy. And there are many other municipalities which are following us. And it will take a long time, but gradually, little bit by little, the people start to ride on the roadway rather than on the sidewalks. But still, majority of the bicycles are on the sidewalks. Yeah.
Do local governments hear a lot of complaints from pedestrians about the bicycles on the sidewalks, or do people just sort of quiet about it?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, the accidents are increasing. So the people complained, of course, to the authorities. And depending on the municipalities, some advanced municipalities take the action. Like our city, we are trying to be the number one city, bike-oriented or bike-friendly city, and the mayor is very active about that. So that policy change, or the people's movement, is working a little bit. Yeah, it will take time. And another important thing, not only the infrastructure, but the education is quite important, especially the high school students. They are young and they are reckless or cyclists. So to them, the education for the safer biking is very important, and we are trying to do that as well. Yeah.
And do students in Japan learn about bicycle riding in school, or do they learn from their parents, or how do people learn?
Good point. We teach in the elementary school. We teach at school, kids learn how to ride on the bicycle, as well as how to ride along the street on the left side. If you don't have any the separation between the sidewalks and the roadway, the narrow speed street, they are told to go on the left side of the road, and when you turn, of course, you have to look back and forth, and at the stop sign, you're supposed to stop. But as you are getting older, from junior high to high school, especially high school students, they forgot all about those, what you have learned. And that's another problem we have facing. How to educate those people, young people, to obey the regulation. Yeah. So that is both the infrastructure or hardware as well as the software, the education, regulation. Those are the, say, both needs, I mean, like the wheel on both, two wheels, you do need both hard and soft. And that is what we are trying to do. Yeah.
What's the status of pedestrian advocacy in Japan? Are the pedestrians organized? What's going on there?
No, it's not. I would say, this Walk 21, I have been attending to Walk 21 frequently. Like last year, I was in Vienna. And you might have noticed how many Japanese delegates are here. Only half a dozen or so. That means, that itself means the status of pedestrian advocacy in Japan. It is still very premature, and I'm sure it will become an important issue. One of the main reasons is we are getting very old. I mean, our society itself is old, so there are a lot of elderlies who are frail and walk around, and for them to provide safe working environment is very important. Otherwise, they have to stay at home, and that is really not bad. I mean, not good. To keep them healthy until the end, the best way is to encourage them to walk out. So from now on, that's one of the things I really want to advocate is to make the people realize how important the walking is. And towards that, we are trying to do many research work. What is important is our society is like the United States. It's an auto-dependent, auto-oriented society. In just half a century, before that we didn't have too much private automobile. Now almost everybody has it. And especially in the rural area, automobile is the only mode. There is not much public transport. And until now, not many people ride on. I would say for the short distance, bicycle and walking is the mode. But for the medium to long distance, automobile is the only mode. But people are getting older, they cannot continue to drive for the rest of their life. So sooner or later they have to switch, or they have to, they can't really continue to drive. So then how we can secure their mobility? Like those days when they are young, they can go anywhere by automobile. Now they have to find, and we have to provide them the way to secure their mobility, one way or the other. And that is, one is public transport, like light rail, buses, and the other is, of course, the bicycle. And the last 1 mile, of course, is walking, or last 100 meters, so walking. So walking facility is very important. And in the past decade or so, we started to have the barrier-free environment to even out the ups and downs, and to provide the escalators, the elevators in the stations. But that still is not, complete, perfect. There are still many loopholes here and there. So barrier-free works only from the very beginning to the origin to your destination. If you have somewhere in between there is a block, then you cannot go any further, right? So that is important to provide the barrier-free network, so anybody can go to wherever you want to go. Yeah. So we are working on that too.
We're in Seoul, Korea, talking with Nicola Metamorak, who's the co-author of Kojects. What is Kojects?
Kojects is a website about transport and urban development in Korea, where we write articles about anything new that happens in new projects and try to introduce it to non-Koreans in and outside of Korea.
What sort of topics have you covered recently?
Recently I wrote about the public bike sharing system's first anniversary and made a small update about the number of accidents, number of members, or how it developed throughout the last 12 months.
So the bike share anniversary, how's it been going?
Quite well, like it's met all expectations. The system is expanding throughout the city. It's getting introduced into more and more districts, more and more neighborhoods. It received like bike sharing stations. The infrastructure is still lacking. There could be more infrastructure, but so far they're on track and they have a huge vision for the next couple of years, which are going to be, like, I think, quite achievable and successful.
So where are we standing right now? What's all this interesting stuff around us?
So here we are, it's called the Info Garden. It's actually a preview of the Seoul Sky Garden or Seoul Station 7017 project. That's going to build like 2 kilometers down here at the Seoul Station.
And just what is that project? What's happening?
So Seoul Station 7017, it's from 1970. Overpass was built next to the Seoul Station for cars to pass through the area, and now it was closed down last year to traffic. And next year, 2017, it's going to reopen as a public space, as a huge pedestrian area with a lot of green, different, like you can see, like different trees and different vegetation, and place really to enjoy and to have something for citizens.
Has Seoul been doing other things to make the city more interesting or more pleasant for pedestrians to get around?
So Seoul made a mistake that focused a lot on cars, very car-centric development for many decades. But then in 1990s they identified that it's the wrong way to go. And since 98, around 2000, they tried to implement more pedestrian-related policies. You can see lots of them here around the city, also around the center a lot here. Lately, they've like car-free Sundays, car-free areas, pedestrian priority zones that have been implemented during the last years and expanded continuously. And now also what we can see more and more, like public spaces expanding, car lanes transformed again to public spaces for pedestrians, for people to enjoy.
Does Seoul have a walking culture in that people like to walk, or people think of walking, or are they stuck in that the earlier auto culture where we had too many highways built and too many roads widened before the 1990s?
The funny thing about Seoul's walking culture is nobody knows that it exists, and the policymakers completely neglected it and completely ignored anything like walking. They focused on a lot on public transport, which is good. Public transport is very necessary in the city. But then outside, as soon as you step out of the station, you have been completely lost. Then you have to walk up to your house, to your final destination. And these days it's getting better. The policymakers are also recognized, and even the citizens demand a better walking environment. So they now see actually 30%, or let's say 30% of people are walking in the city, and they want to enjoy it. They don't enjoy it as much as they could, or as much as is possible in a modern city, but it's getting better and more improvements are being done.
And if I were to come back to Seoul in 5 years, 10 years, I know a lot can happen rapidly sometimes. Other than the finished Sky Garden, what else might I see?
What else might you see? That's a good question. I think the Sky Garden is the beginning. Or actually, like Cheongcheon was the beginning, like a decade ago, by removing the urban freeway and making the public space with a beautiful stream. Now the next step is this Skyway, or Sky Garden. Then what we are going to see now is with this public bike sharing also, we have more bicycles in the city, which is also going to improve the pedestrian environment, as if more bicycles it's better for pedestrians. We will hopefully have less cars in the next decades, because Seoul also plans to reduce the speed limits in the city, from 60 kilometers per hour to 40 or even like 30 in the best case. And to reduce the number of cars allowed to enter the city center. So that's going to also improve or give more space back to cyclists, to pedestrians.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.